Dr. Garth Davis, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Howard.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you about like your evolution as a public figure, as an expert, as an authority. Like what you said, like you're tired of talking about protein.
I am tired of talking about protein. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've kind of beaten that to death, although it's still, I feel like we've beaten it to death, but then, on a daily basis, someone still asks me, where do I get my protein from? So I guess we got to keep it going.
Right. But, so for people who don't know, you wrote this book, Proteinaholic. You I guess
with your help.
I helped. I'll admit to that.
Yeah.
I was just rereading it in preparation for this interview. I'm going, this is a great book.
You know what? The funny thing, I did the same thing. I was Dr. Oz was going to interview me about the book, and so I was like, God, I haven't read the book in a while, and I reread it. I was like, oh my God, this is pretty good. We had a lot of research in there. It's really good.
Right. But when I met you, like there was already a manuscript, like, it needed some stuff, but essentially the work was done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd already gone on that kind of like, oh my God, there's something I'm missing in my medical practice and I better search for it. And of course it was food, and specifically it was plants, and maybe the resounding message I got through the literature that, more protein is not better. In fact, it could be worse. And I had already done that and just needed to put it to words.
Yeah. So I'm curious first, like before you wrote the book, like you said, you wrote the book because you were tired of saying the same thing to your patients. Mm-hmm. Like, can you remember the moment in your practice when you realized you knew enough that you had to change how you were talking to patients?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I never want to be that guy that tells a patient to do something anecdotally. Like I see these doctors out there that they went on a diet and they lost weight, so therefore they think that is the diet that all patients should do. And that's, craziness. That's not science. And so there was a couple things happening at the same time, and I talk about it in the book, but I had high cholesterol, I found out, and I had not just high cholesterol, but I also had fatty liver and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, I've got the same problems my patients have. And yes, I changed my diet, and yes, it cured me, but I changed my diet for myself because I went over all the research, and I was like, oh, not that this is going to help me, but it might help all of my patients too. But I remember very clearly thinking, I'm not going to recommend a diet until I am sure that I have looked at this, a million different times in a million different ways, and in a very different fashion than I see done on the internet now. One study does not prove anything. I didn't want to look at one study and say, and as you can see in the structure of the book, I wanted to say, okay, well, what are the healthiest people in the world eating? Because if we're the least healthy population in the world, I want to know what the most healthy populations in the world are eating. But again, that's a univariate analysis. You can't say, well, this population eats plants and they live a long time, therefore plants make you live a long time. You need some epidemiology with some control for confounders. So it's called multivariate regression analysis. So really good epidemiology to tell us, yeah, there is something behind this. And then, well, if there's something behind it, what is that something? So a mechanism of action. And then a randomized control trial to prove your mechanism of action. So I had a very systematic way I wanted to look at the science. And once I was convinced about that, that's when I started using it with patients.
Right. See, but what you just said is the problem right there, because you used a bunch of words that most people don't understand, like regression analysis, multivariate, randomized control trial. And the people who are arguing the other thing are showing single studies that are really clear.
Oh, it's hilarious to me because like today on Instagram, someone posted a thing that said heart healthy foods, and it listed butter and tallow and organ meat. And I just went on there. I was like, okay, you're going to say that, fine. Just show me some data. And so the person's response was, all the data you post is epidemiology, and it's all been debunked. They love to use the word debunked. What are you talking about? They're like, in their mind, first of all, I love it when a layperson who knows nothing about science says that he's debunked a whole, field of science, with PhDs and experts. It's just crazy. But what gets me is that I think they seem to think epidemiology is univariate analysis, which means they think what we're saying is, oh, this population eats plants and they live long, therefore it's the plants. We're doing much more than that. We're taking a look at a population and what they eat, and we're controlling. We're saying, well, let's not, smoking is a risk factor for heart disease, so let's remove everybody that smokes. Exercise, one group exercises, one group doesn't. Well, that could be a confounder. So let's remove all those people. Let's look at the same people where the only variable is the food. And let's look, not just the food, let's look specifically where the only variable is saturated fat, et cetera, et cetera. So we get very specific in these studies. And I mean, these are studies that are done by brilliant statisticians that go through the stuff and comb through it like crazy. And, the layperson online is like, oh, all your science has been debunked. What kind of nonsense is that? But that's what we deal with in this world.
Yeah. So do you remember a patient when you decided, okay, you know what? I read the research. I've changed my own diet. I'm confident. Like, what kind of reaction did you like? Is there a patient you remember when you started this new way of practicing medicine?
Yeah, there's a few patients. I could remember a whole group of patients. I remember giving I do support groups with my patients. So the first time I really talked about it was in a support group where I said to them, it's kind of weird, but, in my first book, I talked about everybody eating protein. I've told you guys to eat a lot of protein, but I've been doing the science that shows differently. The hard thing to measure is that patients seldom go all the way with my recommendations. So I'm going to recommend a whole food plant-based diet. The patients don't go completely whole food, not some of them do, but not all of them do. And so it's hard for me to say, oh, there was this huge shift all of a sudden, but there was a palpable shift because I do diet logs with people. And very quickly I was seeing, before I'd see all protein foods, I shouldn't even say that because, beans are protein foods too. I would see meat, dairy, eggs, meat, dairy, eggs, meat, dairy, eggs. And now I was starting to see some other foods in there. And I could remember very tangibly going through this change myself while many of my patients are going through it and having discussions with them about, oh my God, I feel great. I'm like, I do too. This really does work. It's crazy. So yeah, I could remember that pretty clearly.
Mm-hmm. But so you wrote the book partly because you would, like the story you tell in the book is you told someone to eat more, fiber-rich foods, plants, and then they came back, showed you their food log, and it was like, jerky, and you're like,
oh yeah, that was a little bit, that was getting a little bit later on because the more I saw people respond to this message, and the better changes I saw in them, and then of course the more research that kept coming out, the more I started saying, okay, I've really got to change people's diets. So then I was like, okay, this is it. This really does work. I'm going to start changing people's diets. And then when the diet doesn't change, that's when I really started getting frustrated. When I would tell people, you got to eat plants. And if there's a snack, eat an apple. And then they come to see me and I look at their diet log and there's a protein bar instead of an apple. Oh, why'd you eat the protein bar? Well, because it's got protein. That's when I really started saying because my challenge became protein. My challenge in getting people to eat a higher plant-based diet was that they were worried about protein. And that's how I really got to writing that book. Was that became the biggest challenge because the biggest question I got was, but where am I going to get my protein?
So you went from being a very sort of naive consumer of science, like, oh, what's out there? Oh, blue zones, that's really interesting, to then, collecting thousands of studies. When did you start?
Well, I wouldn't say I was naive in science. So
no, but you were naive about what the science said,
like with nutrition. But I knew how to read science.
Right.
So I had been a student of science and more specifically in surgery and in my surgery. So I had the acumen to understand how to evaluate an article for its validity. Right. Like I had the ability to pick up an article and say, like most people, they go on PubMed and they read the abstract, and that's not the way you should read science. The abstract is somewhat subjective. It's got, it summarizes the article, but I want to know specifically the methods they used for that study. I want to know how they designed it. And then I want to look at the results specifically before I ever start reading their conclusions, because it's in the conclusion section, which most people jump to, where it becomes subjective and they start adding in things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I knew how to do this. I knew how to do this before. I had just never done it towards nutrition because, quite frankly, I never really thought about nutrition affecting us that much. I know that sounds stupid, but as a surgeon, someone was overweight. It was a problem with their intestines I had to fix. It sounds dumb saying this now, but in Western medicine, we just didn't have much training in nutrition. And it just wasn't brought up as the cause of these disease processes. And so my thought process was, throw medicine at it, throw surgery at it, not throw food at it. And so I had the science behind the medicine and the surgery. I just never applied that science to the nutrition.
Right. And I guess that's what I meant by being naive.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like in a really nice way. Like you had no preconceptions. You went at a certain point, you went from being a consumer, a reader of this science, to being, I would say, a curator on your way to being an expert. When did you start your social media, your Facebook page and your Instagram?
Right.
And what was it? Can you remember like the first post you made?
Vaguely, I do. Yes, it all happened because I'm doing these studies and I'm getting all the science, and I mean I felt like I was Nicolas Cage in a movie, where he's on a quest to find the treasure map or whatever it is, because it really became like this. Oh my God, how did I not know this experience? Like, oh my God, how is this science out there and I didn't know this? And so I wanted to tell people about the science, and I got in contact with HarperCollins publisher because they had published a couple other authors that had talked about plant-based diets. And I talked to the guy and I was like, look, I want to get this message out there. It's not just that we should eat plants, it's that protein is not nearly as important as we thought it was. It may actually be harmful. And he's like, that's awesome idea. And I would love to do that, but you need to have a Facebook presence. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, people have to follow you. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try. And so I started posting, and people started sharing. And he wanted me to have 15,000 followers before he would publish the book. So that came very quickly. I got 15,000 followers, and then we started.
Did you do anything to get followers except just post good stuff?
Just post. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when sometimes I'll look back at old posts and stuff, and there's like, 10 likes or 15 likes or something like that. And I was like, look, 15 people like this. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Right. Like as of today, you've got like 107,000 likes on the page.
Yeah.
So what was like, okay, so he says, okay, you got to have a Facebook page. What did you think you were going to post? Like, was it memes? Was it like, cause you came to my attention because you were posting these really long ass discussions of like, that had 20 links in them.
Right. And that's what it was. I thought, if I'm going to do this, I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. And I don't want to do a meme because science is so much more complicated than that. And I thought to myself, this would be a good testing ground for the book, because the book, I'm kind of surprised at how well the book's done because it is pretty scientific. And so I thought, I'm going to try this out. I mean, people are talking nonsense out there. I'm going to bring the actual science with links. And if people like it, great. If they don't, they're not going to like my book. So maybe I shouldn't do it. So it kind of started as a testing ground. And I tested, a lot of the concepts. Like, I'm going to post something as radical as sugar doesn't cause diabetes. And I'm going to give all the different posts for that and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. What did you discover or learn from people's reactions? If they started, what they liked, what they didn't like, what comments? Because you get a lot of hate on that page.
Oh, I get a lot of hate. You should have seen the hate I got for drizzling some olive oil on my tomato and you'd think I would have killed someone. Ridiculous. The world's ridiculous. But I've seen a lot of interesting things. There are a lot of interested people that are far more intelligent than they get credit for. So it's funny enough now, when I talk to doctors about nutrition, I used to have two different talks. One I would give to the layperson and one I would give to physician audiences. They've kind of merged into one talk now because lay people are actually, they could understand this stuff far more than I would think I could understand it if I hadn't studied it all these years. So there's a lot of intelligent people out there that are very interested in the science and are very interested in this new take of, oh, wow, science is much more comprehensive than just reading, a PubMed just anecdote. Also, there are people out there that it simply doesn't matter what the science tells them. They are not going to listen to you. And funny enough, the people that know the least are the most likely to be like that. And those people are also the most likely to be the most vehement, ad hominem attack. There was a great study on what's called the Dunning Kruger effect. So, the Dunning Kruger effect?
Not off the top of my head.
So basically what the Dunning Kruger effect is that the people that know the least will think that they know the most.
Okay.
And they did a study of this with vaccines and autism. And they got a group of people and they asked them about their views on vaccines and autism and asked them all kinds of questions about autism and all kinds of questions about vaccines. And sure enough, the people that knew the absolute least about the science behind vaccines and the science behind autism were the people that were most vehemently stating that vaccines cause autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that all the time, this Dunning-Kruger effect. I mean, these people they know nothing. Like, I would never, go online and someone's talking about stock market or something that I know nothing about and get on there and be like, you know nothing about what you're talking about because I saw this YouTube video. Someone the other day was arguing with me and they sent me a Wikipedia link. It's ridiculous. You're going to argue with me with a Wikipedia link or a YouTube video? I mean, one guy sent me a YouTube video on climate change. He sends me a YouTube video from this absolute shill scientist who isn't even a climate scientist, who Trump has hired to help debunk science and he gets paid, pretty well from oil and gas. But this guy saw his YouTube video and is sure that he now is the expert because he saw this YouTube video and he's going to tell me how little I know. It's preposterous to make these statements like your science has been debunked, or like a lot of guys are like, everything you do is epidemiology. I mean, we had tons of randomized controlled trials in our book, but people think that because they haven't read the study, therefore it doesn't exist. The level of, some of it's stupidity to me. I mean, some of it's just pure stupidity. Some of it's just they don't want to hear anything against their current beliefs. They don't want to be challenged in that way. But that kind of stuff is very common.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote about the stages or the symptoms of denialism.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So this wasn't new, but so at the same time, there's a whole bunch of people, and I think when we were working on the book, we didn't realize it was going to become like this national epidemic about everything. Like America is like Dunning Kruger writ large.
Yeah, it's crazy. We knew about it in nutrition, but I didn't know it would go through. I mean, now we see it. I see it in so many different places. I mean, people think the world is flat, and any expert telling them, they've got this. We talked about it a bit in our book, but this appeal to authority. They hate it when you appeal to authority. And I'm like, why wouldn't you appeal to authority? I mean, I want to know what someone who's studied this their entire life thinks. Why would I not appeal to authority? Why would I appeal to a YouTuber or an influencer to make it? So it's funny. Yeah, you're right. We talked about things that we're now seeing as part of this administration and in the kind of the world culture of, facts don't matter anymore.
Yeah. So there is that large group of people, and then there's the true believers who, whatever you say will cheer, and they're probably no more educated, but they like us instead of the other team.
Right.
And so, and then when you commit a heresy, like put olive oil on, they can freak out because now it's like, who do I believe, mommy or daddy? Because Essie says,
they get because Esselstyn says don't put oil, they're going to freak out. And I put in the thing, like, look, you can freak out all you want, but there's science about this. And the funny thing is, in the article, in the post, I talk about, this is only a drizzle. Don't use it if you're trying to lose weight, et cetera, et cetera. I put the little caveats in there. But the science behind the olive oil is long and plentiful. Just coming out and saying, well, Esselstyn says not to do that, it's just as bad as someone saying, well, meat eaters do, meat's good for you. It's all the same problem.
Right.
It's just, you're right. They pick different teams.
Right. So what fascinates me about sort of following your public career is like you're speaking to the reasonable people in the middle who don't necessarily agree with you, but are open-minded. So you get it. My
favorite people.
So I can think of, like, first there was with Denise Minger. with like, shocking to me that you would like consider like, figuratively shaking her hand, like, no, she's the enemy. She attacked Colin, and then there was
Yeah, but there's a difference because Denise attacked, but with science. So she actually built a good scientific argument. Her attack on our book, while I could counter all of the attacks, was a well thought out, very well organized, worthy of a response type attack, which is very different than your science has been debunked, you know nothing, eat meat, bacon, that's two different things.
Okay. And then there was Z-Dog.
Yeah, and Z-Dog was afterwards, Z-Dog became very friendly with me, and he was gonna have me on, but he didn't want to debate me directly. He wanted to get an expert, and then the expert he chose kind of backed out, and I don't know, that never happened. But him and I we still seem to get along quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but you were interested in that relationship. Like it didn't. Yeah. It was it's like two prize fighters. They'll get together on the ESPN promo and like snarl at each other, but they're on the same team. Like
like the other day, I did a video with this guy Bart K. He was a scientist himself, so I thought, okay, I'll do it because he's a scientist. But his views are just so far completely. There's just not a lot of science behind it, and so I just lost it. Now he wants to debate again. It wasn't a debate. There was just no science to debate. A nice enough guy, but I just didn't see this going anywhere. Like his followers are zealot, and they're not going to change, and he's not going to change, and I'm not going to learn anything from him because I really, quite honestly, I'm just interested in science. Opinion matters nothing to me, and so. That just wasn't working. But for instance, the guy Spencer Nadolsky, and Spencer's a brilliant guy, and we've got our differences. We also have a lot of our similarities. He tried a vegan diet and did extremely well on it, which still kills me because he did extremely well and then went off of it. But I'm always going to respect his opinion, and he's always going to make fun of me if one of my opinions is too far-fetched. And that's a kind of relationship I could learn from and I enjoy. And that's the kind of debate that I love. I just don't like it when it gets into the zealot type stuff. That just kills me.
Mm-hmm. So how do you, like you are, you killed on the doctors. Like people were saying, like you really represented, not just our point of view, but science really well. Yeah. How do you approach, like the doctors is a public TV show. It's built around intrigue and sensationalism and controversy to some extent, the way everything for public consumption is. How did you prepare and think about what you wanted to do? And I would say, to set the scene, maybe you could set the scene about what they were talking about and what they wanted you to comment on.
Well, the doctors I did not like that appearance at all because I wasn't prepared for what they did. I knew they were going to, first it was just having us on to talk about What the Health. So I thought, okay, yeah, great. I knew that they had some problems with some of the statements in What the Health, like a lot of people have. Their biggest thing is sugar and diabetes, which was one of my favorite topics to talk about. And they had the issue with smoking and eggs. So then I hear a day or two before that Lustig is going to be on there. And Lustig is, a famous researcher. And I'd love a chance to debate Lustig. So I thought maybe it'd be me and Lustig talking about some of his.
And his whole thing is sugar is evil, right?
Yeah. So I thought, okay, I'd love to debate Lustig, and so I'll be prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for is that we get there and they put us in the audience, kind of like low down, and they're sitting above us, and that they have some guy in the audience next to us. I don't even know who he is, like an exercise therapist or something. They've got Lustig and all of them attacking us and not giving us a chance to even make our case. And that was pretty frustrating. That's when I started yelling at them. And some of it obviously got edited, but it was just ridiculous. And that's when I started yelling, like, this is absolutely the most unscientific discussion. We're not talking science at all. And
did Lustig agree with you about that?
No, Lustig would never agree with. I mean, Lustig said a few kind of, I don't remember what was in the show and what was cut, but he said, look, Garth and I have debated this because we had just debated at the Plant Nutrition Conference. We had each given an opposing presentation. And so, I mean, had it just been Lustig and I, we could have probably had a civilized conversation. But then I kind of had to lash out at Lustig too, because he was presenting one of his papers where he didn't even have a control group, which how do you have a paper where you have a experimental group and not a control group to compare it to? So, I started having to lash out. It became too much of a lashing out and no one actually sitting down and talking about the science.
Mm-hmm. So what did you learn from that experience that, guiding your acceptances of invitations going forward?
No, I'd still accept the invitation because all I'll do is if we're not going to talk science, I'm going to call you out on the fact that we're not talking science. I'll go on Joe Rogan tomorrow. I mean, Joe at one point was going to have me on and then backed out. And I don't know if he just doesn't really want to have someone who's going to go in there and truly challenge him. But he's had some people that have challenged him on this issue. He had Rich Roll and he's had John Joseph, but
Dr. Kahn too, right?
He had Dr. Kahn too, yeah. But I don't know. I'm going to bring the science if I go on there, and if he brings on someone, I got frustrated in Joel's one because the guy he was debating was just not bringing science at all. But Joe was, cheering on the guy, bringing the no science. Obviously, if I was there, that wouldn't be tolerated.
So how do you see yourself kind of as, you're this, no holds barred debater, like you're going to bring the science because you really want the truth to come out. And if you don't have the truth and someone else does, like you're hungry for it. How do you just sort of interpersonally, like you make friends with these people? You're friendly with Denise, I think with what was Ben Greenfield.
I'm not friendly with them, but we've had
collegial
before. Collegial, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I respect again, it goes back to the noise that you hear about with people without any kind of background or any kind of knowledge about the stuff. If someone could make a good argument, I'm going to respect that argument. I mean, if you're going to make a good argument with science, I'll respect that. If you're going to call out my science and give me specifically what's wrong with my science, I could respect that. Our scientific argument, I hate to tell all the vegans out there, is not perfect. I can't go on here and tell you that the vegan diet is the perfect diet and the only diet for health. There's never been a study showing someone with a high plant-based but some wild raised meat. They're just that kind of stuff hasn't been done, and so I can't comment on that. I could infer from my science, I could infer that vegans do better than vegetarians in the Adventist Health Study to make me say that even a little bit of meat is not good. But can I prove that? No. And so I don't know everything, and I can respect another person's views if they can present science to support their views. But to get on and say, you know nothing, and me who's never treated a single patient or read a single scientific article or been to a single scientific meeting says this. The other thing that I really dislike when doctors make posts about things that they can't back up at all. Like, especially when heart disease is our number one killer, to be saying that, oh, butter is good for your heart. You just can't make that statement. You cannot make a statement that butter is good for your heart. You can't make that statement. You could say, I think butter is good for your heart because it's natural, but you can't go up there and tell people to eat butter. It's crazy.
Right. But and people are getting that from doctors and scientists aren't taking the time that you took to read the original paper.
Yeah. So the original paper that got this butter thing going, first of all, was completely funded by industry. Second of all, never said butter was good for you. That's not what they said. They said saturated fat may not cause heart disease.
Right. Or may not cause heart disease more than unsaturated fat.
More than unsaturated fat. That's what they said. Now, there's been many studies since and before showing that was quite different. And of course, in that study, they controlled for cholesterol, meaning if you had high cholesterol, they called that an independent factor as a risk factor for heart disease. So those people were taken out of the equation. So they were just looking at people that ate saturated fat but didn't get heart disease because they didn't get high cholesterol. But most people that eat saturated fat get high cholesterol. You understand what I'm saying? They took out, they purposefully controlled for cholesterol because they knew that was a mechanism by which saturated fat contribute to atherosclerosis. So the layperson's not going to be able to do that kind of scientific analysis, and they're going to be like, oh, saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, therefore I'm going to eat butter. And look, if someone says there are studies that show that saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, yeah, there are studies that show that, but there's no study that shows that saturated fat is good for you. That doesn't exist.
Right. So I wondered, do you think that like we're worse off now with the sort of the democratization of this, what looks like science, compared to like when I was a kid, you know, there were experts, and like I wouldn't know where to look up something on PubMed or that it even you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're way worse off. I heard this excellent analysis of they were comparing Orwell to Aldous Huxley, and I thought it was fascinating because they said what Orwell worried about was a control of information. Like we weren't going to be allowed information, and it was going to be controlled by certain people that would control our minds by controlling information. Huxley quite geniusly predicted this, and I don't know if you've read Huxley much, but he geniusly predicted the fact that we would have way too much information, so much information that it would all become relative, and we would fall into this kind of relativism where we wouldn't be able to find truth in the sea of information. And that's where we are right now. There's just way too much information. The layperson should not be on PubMed. First of all, you can't get the full article. I could get the full article because I've got my hospital's ability to access the full article. But the layperson out there can't get the full article. They don't know the full breadth of research that comes before, and maybe it's come after the article they've studied. They've never been to a scientific meeting where we tear apart these articles. They don't know how to analyze it. So the layperson has just no, I hate to say it, people are like, oh, that's so, I don't know, cocky of you to say that, but it's like speaking a different language, science is. And if you don't know that language, reading that article could really throw you off.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of people out there who, might disagree with you, but if push came to shove, they would rather you do their operation than their cousin Bert.
Right. I mean, we trust science when it comes to like building our cars and building our planes and me operating on you, but we just seem to not trust science when they think that they know more than us. But it's just crazy.
All right. So you talked about PubMed really being kind of out of reach. What do we do? Like you've jumped into the fray. You're like, do we educate? Do we try to educate people? Because like things you report, you posted something I think yesterday on your Facebook page or 2 days ago about people quitting the Trump administration and no more scientists. And so like before, so like 10 years ago, the internet was full of BS and everybody's arguing, but there was like, wonky groups of people who were insulated from that, just looking, because some of my neighbors worked for the EPA, and they were, they were lovely people, but like really boring in the best possible way. What does the science say? Or people who are working for human services, like what do these research say about this study or that study? But it feels like that everything's been thrown out at the highest levels.
Yeah, it's funny because the real scientist, because I'm not the real scientist, I'm just reporting this stuff. I mean, I take it and apply it in a clinical setting, which is important because a lot of scientists they're not in the clinical setting to see their science working. So I'm kind of in an ideal situation in that part. But the real scientists, the real people doing the science, they're not on Twitter. They're not on Facebook and all that stuff. They don't care they don't care about some guys like, oh, the scientists don't know what they're talking about. That, like, I know these guys, and to them, it's like, how stupid for me to react to those people. And so they're not hearing from the real scientists, even in the nutrition world, people like Walter Willett and stuff like that, they're not answering the text. I'm the idiot who's down there fighting these guys for God knows what reason, but I'm fighting them because no one else is fighting them.
Well, you're like Bill Nye, right? Who gets on his knees every so often and says, for God's sakes, you're not 12 years old anymore. Grow up.
Right. Yeah. That's what I want. I just want people like, come on, don't just listen to someone else for 1 second. What do we do? I don't know what we do. I guess we just keep presenting the information as best we can, try to educate people. I mean, like I watched this Netflix documentary the other day on Cambridge Analytica. And it's fascinating how easily people are duped. Don't be a sheep, don't, and people got to learn that there's a difference between skepticism and denialism. All right. Skepticism says, I'm going to question you. I'm going to question, and I'm going to come up with reasons to question and all that kind of stuff. But don't get so dogmatic that you question so much that you become one of these people that there's nothing that could convince you outward. Then you become a denialist. And people could say to you, well, you're vegan, and it's not true. I mean, I'm vegan, but I'm not. I could tell you where I've got flaws in my argument. And for the most part, I'm vegan because of ethics. We're not talking ethics here. We're talking science. But if you were going to challenge me that, for instance, eating fish is good for you, I'm going to have a hard time arguing with you. I could argue with you about fish being horrible for the environment. I could argue with you about ethics of eating fish, but I can't argue with you on the health with fish. I can't. I won't mention his name, but one of the big time plant-based speakers got really angry with me about this. Like, how could you tell people that fish is good for you? I don't tell people. I'm just telling people what science shows. Okay, that's all I'm telling you.
Well, I remember I was reading the article from, I think it was the Adventist II trial, and the fish eaters did slightly better than the vegans. And I'm like, I do not like this study. Can we?
Right. I don't like that study either. But it's the fact. The pescatarians did better than the vegans, and it's probably because they're getting omega-3 and the vegans aren't. And we could talk circles around that study, and all of a sudden we start becoming like these other guys, like, oh, it's just epidemiology. We start using the same arguments they're using. And the funny thing is, everyone uses the same. At this point in time, after all this debating, I know every argument anybody's going to throw at me at any given time. That's why I'm like, if Joe Rogan called me and wanted me to come on tomorrow to debate with anybody, there would be no prep. I know exactly. They use the same tired arguments over and over again. It's like they had like a little meeting and said, these are going to be our arguments. And they just propagate them all through. Right. Same with anti-vaxxers. It's the same thing. Everybody's got the same arguments, and it's so unbelievably unscientific. But I guess I don't. The real question, what do we do? And I don't know what the answer to that is, except kind of show people. The thing I liked about that Netflix documentary is it kind of showed people how vulnerable we are to being influenced, and I want people to kind of snap out of that and start being a little bit more analytical and realizing that there aren't absolute answers, and that there are people that are talking pretty credibly, and that you should relate a little bit on your common sense. I think you could common sense tell when there's someone crazy talking and when there's someone not.
I think humans may have lost that ability. I remember watching, the Dog Whisperer, Cesar Millan's show.
Yeah.
He would say dogs would never follow an unstable alpha.
Yeah,
right. But humans somehow.
Well, we got an unstable alpha. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, the place you have influence over the next generation. You've got a couple of kids. Do you think about training them to be good consumers of science and knowledge?
Oh, wow. I haven't really, they're 10 and 12, so they would listen to me for about 1 second on that topic. But I think I'm more trying to just train them to be good people and to be conscious of the effect they have in the world and the effect they have on other people. And, they're vegetarian, they're not vegan. I get cautious of my kids being overzealous with them because I don't want to have thousands of dollars in psychiatric bills later on and eating disorders and things like that. So I try to let them come to it as they come to it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do. I love talking to med schools. And when I've talked in med school populations and to doctors, I definitely love talking to doctors because I think doctors lose sight of how to analyze nutritional science. And so I do try to give them my talk when I talk to them is not entirely just, protein isn't good for you, and these are the studies. I shouldn't say protein isn't good for you, but too much protein isn't good for you. I also specifically go into how you've been duped by other studies, because doctors can be just as bad as lay people as, I read the study and it said that, low carb is good for you. It was like, well, did you really read that study? Let me, show you.
Right. I mean, one thing that really struck me is that, like, you're teaching your daughters, you're trying to teach your daughters to be good people. It feels like on some level, you and I are talking, we're writing books, we're sharing facts, but the underlying receptivity of people, the medium is either, are people like good people, open-minded? Like, it feels like rejection of science isn't an intellectual decision. It's like an emotional wounding.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I think, you know what, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody else. I think the situation we're in right now has so painted us, like, I guess when you think about it, you think, oh, science is dead and everybody's stupid. But that's really not the case. I mean, if you look at the comments on my posts and stuff, the vast majority of them are positive. And there's many that might challenge me in a very nice, respectful, we have a respectful conversation way. There's only a few idiots that are posting. There's only again, Trump lost the popular vote, and probably would have lost it even worse if Bernie supporters had come out. I mean, my point here being that I think there's a lot more sane people than there are crazy people. I think the sane people are going to have to start getting as loud as the Dunning Kruger sufferer. I think that's the problem, is that the really intelligent people, they kind of keep their mouth shut, which is what then they're saying about that. Like, what's the saying about being wise but not opening your mouth then? Like, there's there's this great cartoon of this guru, and this guy's, and he says to the person, the way to happiness is to not argue with fools. And the guy goes, I disagree. He goes, you're right. And so I think we get into that. I think intelligent people are like, I'm not going to argue. It is kind of stupid for me to argue with, like, one day I was in this long argument with this guy online, and my wife was getting mad at me because I was spending all my time just viciously sending him papers and all stuff. And then I went and looked. She was like, who is he? I was like, I don't know. And so I went and looked on his profile. He was 19 years old. And I'm having this, like, scientific debate. He's a bartender who's 19 years old. It's stupid for me to be debating with a 19-year-old bartender. That's a dumb thing for me to be doing. And so I think intelligent people don't get into these stupid arguments because they think it's stupid. They know they're not going to change their mind. But I think that they're going to have to start getting loud because they're not the loud people. The stupidity has become louder.
Well, what just struck me is, like, your barrier to entry to writing a book was 15,000 Facebook followers. Right. And so I'm on your page now, and I'm looking at this thing you posted on August 5th, 7:46 a.m. about people quitting the Trump administration, blocking climate science. And you reached almost 20,000 people, 95 comments, 80 shares. When I look down, Facebook shows me one comment of the 95. I can view more, but it says one comment. It's LOL, the only people who censor climate scientists are the alarmist, hoaxers, conformist retards. Da 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 da. Like, Facebook is trying to get, they're giving this guy the platform equal to yours. Right. And they, what do I want to do? I want to write to, reply, you dumb mother.
Isn't it so? It's amazing how influenced it all is by Trump, because that language he just uses so Trumpian, so like not an intelligent argument or a comment, just retards. I mean, come on, But this is the kind of stupidity that's out there. Like, could that person who left that comment possibly know anything about climate science? Right. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. There's a comment I really wouldn't answer.
Right, but the fact that we have algorithms, business-driven, profit-driven algorithms that make me want to get into a fight with this guy because then I'm going to spend more time on Facebook and consume more ads. Right. And you mentioned Cambridge Analytica, which has been used for very nefarious political. Can you explain so quickly what Cambridge Analytica is? Because I don't know that I could exactly.
They were a marketing firm, and they were a genius marketing firm. They got into political science, and they realized that they could control people's. They came up with a lot of, like, the lock her up kind of thing. That was a big thing that they would populate, and they would make Facebook posts about this and get people to share these posts. And in the movie they show one successful campaign they had, and I'm forgetting exactly where it was, but there was a group of people. There were two groups of people. I think there was an African population and an Indian population competing for the government. And the Cambridge Analytical people sat there and they said, you know what? We know that the Indian people are going to go and vote. They're going to go and vote. What we're going to do with the African population is we're going to run. They were working for the Indian population. They're like, for the African population, what we're going to do is we're going to start a whole Facebook campaign. We're going to make it cool to not vote. And they had T-shirts and they had marches and they did this whole campaign about how stupid it is to vote. And guess what? They didn't vote, and the Indian population won. So their ability to jump on this kind of like community type of thing, like let me get people all riled up about this topic, and we could get them to do just about anything. We could get them to not vote for Hillary, and a not vote for Hillary was a vote for Trump in the end.
Right. So, and yet we are now beholden to these platforms to a certain extent.
We are. I just wonder if I'm hoping that we're starting to become a little bit more wise to it. I mean, the fact that people, look, the fake Facebook accounts in the last election running just complete and utter. Hillary Clinton is running a child sex ring in a pizza restaurant. I mean, how could that be shared? But it was shared like crazy. This kind of stuff. I'm hoping that people have wised up to that a bit and realize you can't believe everything you read on the internet or believe. But I don't know. I mean, meanwhile, there's all these fake Garth Davises everywhere, and apparently people are believing it and sending them money. So I don't know. Maybe we are doomed. I don't. I got to say that I've become, this whole battle and everything has left me a lot more pessimistic than I used to be.
Well, can we talk about the fake Garth Davis thing? Because like you're like the most famous scammer in the world.
It's crazy.
Like someone took this picture, the picture of you, and like what happened? Like when did you realize this was happening? This was a thing.
I mean, I started getting like some messages, like, hey, I've been talking to you in Hangouts. I don't even know what Hangouts is. Or, hey, you messaged me on Tinder and then I found you here. I said, no, it wasn't me. At first I was like, this was weird. And then, a few people, oh, someone's sharing your account. Then it just started becoming like literally, Howard, I'm not joking, thousands and thousands of messages coming my way. They messaged my wife. Like one lady one night was like, do you know where your husband is? And my wife's like, yes, sitting next to me. No, he's not. He's not next to you. He's messaging me. And she's like, no, he's literally sitting next to me right now. But the funny that these women are so convinced by these scammers that they think I'm faking it. It's preposterous. And they send them money. Like what doctor is going to friend someone online and ask them for money? But these women are, old lonely women that send these guys money and I guess are desperate for any affection.
And how successful have you been in like stopping it, blocking it?
Utterly not successful in the least bit. In fact, it's probably more now than it's ever been.
And this is I guess on Facebook, on dating apps, on Instagram.
Everywhere. Like now, Words with Friends. And someone's like, are you playing a game with me on Words with Friends? No, I'm not playing a game with you on Words with Friends. It is insane. At first I thought this was an effort to discredit me, but I don't think it is. I think this is some kind of like big scammer thing. And I don't know what, I think they like doctors. I got pictures of my white coat on. And so people relate to doctors. I don't know why my account's been used so much, but it is unbelievable, the amount.
And it's been used successfully. Like the scammers are like winning.
Yeah, I saw an article that I put down. Someone sent me from New Zealand where a woman gave a scammer $350,000, and because he said that he was going to move to marry her, but he needed $350 to get there, and then he would get his millions out or whatever. And you go through the newspaper article, and they show a picture of the scammer, and it's me. I'm just like, oh my God, this is happening all around the world. It's insane. But it just, talks to how gullible we are as a population, how desperate we are to be loved and fit in and, to hear what we want to hear, even when in the back of the mind, we know it isn't true.
I'm like really reaching for like a happy ending to this conversation.
Yeah, I know. I'm depressed now. Look, there's good. Look. I mean, our plant-based diet movement is strong as ever. Game Changers is coming out, which I think is going to be a really important movie. There are all the fast food restaurants are starting to put in plant-based meals. Climate is becoming an issue that people believe in and that are worried about. I mean, the whole straw movement, as silly as it is, because to not use a straw but then to eat fish is hypocrisy at its greatest. But the fact that so many people got behind that movement means that people are interested in the environment and are making changes. So there's changes being made. I do not think Trump is going to win the next election. If he does, I've lost all hope for humanity. And you mark it here, listen to me, I will leave this country if that happens. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think people are waking up.
Yeah. We can go to New Zealand and marry that lady.
Yeah, you're right. She'd give me $350 to move there, and I will marry her to get out of here. Maybe I'll just start a career as a scam artist. But no, I see a positive. I've become a way more pessimistic human being than I used to be. But I do see a positive. I do see a change. I do see more and more people approaching me about plant-based diets. Doctors coming to me and asking me about it. Yeah. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine is booming. I do see a positive.
Okay. The other thing I would say that fills me with optimism is, and I'm wondering if you saw this in Texas. I don't know if the population in Asheville is very different, but in Texas, in Houston, politically, people tend to be very conservative. I've seen so many people. Plant-based diet is like the gateway drug to thinking smarter.
Very true.
Right, like
very
people
true.
Become much more progressive, much more open-minded, much less full of hate.
Absolutely. And that's what happened with me. It was a gateway drug because I went into it for health. I mean, all my research was on health. And then I started dabbling, well, look at climate science. Let me take a look at this. Wow, plant-based diet, climate science. And then, of course, you start thinking about the ethics of it, and it changes you as a human being,
Mm-hmm. So I think, we're like, yeah, things are going bad, but like we're in a really good position. Like the work we're doing in some ways feels more powerful than climate work, than social justice work, than all the things that I really deeply want to happen. It's like this little thing we're working on is like the key. If you're eating like, the product of such incredible cruelty and torture and inequality and murder, it's hard. Right. It's hard to have a heart full of love.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah.
All right. And how's Asheville? Did you
love it? Love it. Love Asheville. Love the town. It's a liberal town. They call it Climate City, though there's a lot of things they could do better for climate, but they're trying. There's a lot of plant-based places to eat, a lot of like-minded people. I really love this town. So enjoying it.
Cool. And do you have I know you and I have talked about maybe like doing more books, but I know you're really busy. Do you have other publication or public persona plans to keep spreading the message?
I don't. This move has been a big move for me to Asheville, so I got to keep the practice going. And we're planning on doing a lifestyle clinic here. But my future is going to be towards this, food and lifestyle, and there will be more books that I'm going to have you help me on, and there will be some changes where we try to spread this message even further.
All right. Awesome. Well, it was great catching up with you.
And, great catching up with you. I enjoyed the talk.
Cool. Well, be well.
All right. Thanks, Howard. Take care.